Because adversity is often the breeding ground for development, dive into Neurointerventional Stories, the uncensored interviews. Our guests, all leaders in the field of neurointervention, share the difficulties they face, the complications they have had to manage, and speak without filters on little discussed, sometimes controversial, or simply taboo subjects. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Sujijantarat again, and today I have the pleasure of sitting here with Dr. Johanna Fifi. She is a professor of neurosurgery, neurology, and radiology, and director of Pediatric Neuroendovascular Program. She is also an associate director of the Cerebrovascular Center at Mount Sinai. There are many more that I can read out, but it'll fill too much of the podcast, and so I'll just get started and say, before you were all of these things, who were you? And you can take it as far back as you want.
Thank you so much for having me here today. So I grew up in Trinidad, and I was an immigrant to this country at the age of 10. In high school, I enjoyed science as well as the humanities, and I really fell in love with the idea of being a doctor and going to medical school. In medical school, I really was drawn to the brain and to this mixture of humanity as well as science that we can see in neurological patients. And I did a residency in neurology. But in my neurology residency, I was exposed to critical care neurology and to stroke, and I really found that exciting. After some thought, decided to do stroke and then pursue endovascular training, which at the time was a little difficult for neurologists in the U.S. There are few programs that would accept neurologists, but I was really lucky to have mentorship at Thomas Jefferson, and then when I was at the NIH to have great mentorship and to be able to embark on this career.
You are currently a SNIS president, and just to give the listeners context, we're sitting here in June of 2025. You're in your last month, going into your last 2 months of your terms as a president of SNIS. And so I want to ask, what was your biggest lesson and takeaway from your term so far?
That's a really good question. The big lesson really is, well, there's probably a couple of big lessons, but one personal lesson is it goes by very quickly. SNIS, it is not just a year because it's built in to your tenure that you're vice president, then president-elect, and then president. So you have some time to prepare, but when it comes, it actually comes all at once. Time flies with all the things that you think you're going to accomplish. And I think a personal lesson is to be happy and to be not stressed and to accept things as they are. And I think it's also been a lesson that, we have a great team at SNIS, so I rely on the members of the executive committee and our board and, of course, our staff very importantly. And we really can accomplish a lot as a team.
What value do you think being involved in organized neurointerventional group, and what would you recommend young people to do to get more involved?
Yeah, I think it's very valuable to your career as well as to your education. And importantly, it's a way to meet mentors as well as mentees, to give you that community of people that you can call for advice, as well as a way to give back. A lot of us, I think, enjoy giving back and mentoring younger people and creating programs and opportunities that everyone in the society can benefit from. So really, if you grow up in neurointervention and you're in a program, you're exposed to one or maybe a handful of perspectives and ways of doing things, and involvement in the society really exposes you to many more alternatives.
You have been part of many important trials. You were on a DSMB board for SELECT2 trial and many other things. What are some of the recent publications, papers, trials that you're part of that jumped out at you, and what have you learned from them?
You brought up SELECT2, and that was really an eye-opening experience. So seeing that trial unfold, something that would change the way that we practice medicine was very exciting. And really, it helped me to grow as an investigator to watch and be part of that. In addition, going back, I was very interested in stroke systems of care, and we've gone through a cycle now where we've seen various trials looking at stroke systems. Back 5 years or so ago, we published our NYC MIS trial, which was looking at one team covering multiple hospitals within New York City. And I think that, to me, was very important because it was something that I believe has become more widespread, and it's a key part of being able to decrease times to treatment is to have organized system, and that's just one part of the equation. And then recently I've been shifted gears a little bit and been focusing on pediatric malformations. We're sort of at the beginning of understanding this. It's not as mature of a field as stroke and thrombectomy is at this point, and I think we're beginning to see similar things as beginning of the 2010s or so, where we have organization of people around the world trying to come together, put cases together. And in this case, going back to a little bit of basic science and trying to understand the etiology and potential avenues for treatment that we haven't even thought of.
I'm actually interviewing Dr. Berenstein, who I know you've trained with, so I'll ask him this question as well, but I'm curious to know, in your experience, in your practice, what are some of the misconceptions that are widespread about BGAM?
I think the first thing is to understand for most of patients with vein of Galen malformation that it is treatable. Most patients. And I think that it's important to know that for the neonates that are presenting in heart failure, for instance, that they can have normal outcomes and be developmentally fine and cured within a few years. I think that's something that sometimes see as patients or moms being given very dismal prognoses. And while it's true that there are patients that do very badly and die and end up disabled from this disease, I think at this stage the majority of patients are doing fairly well, but it does require certain care. And so I think for this disease in particular, it's important to be at a center that has not only the neurointerventionists that are used to treating this disease, but also the neonatologists and pediatric cardiologists that are there to be able to manage as well, because that's just as important, at least in the neonatal stage. It's a very rewarding disease to treat. You follow the patients because often they need serial treatments, and so you watch them grow up a little bit, and then hopefully, once you reach a certain stage of either cure or near cure of the malformation, you can hold back, let them come less often, and then see them, for a checkup in 5-10 years, and it's very fulfilling to see them come back at that time.
Clearly, your resume has spoken for itself regardless of your gender, but I feel like I would not be doing this interview justice if I don't ask you this question. And as one of the first female pioneers of this field and from neurology pathway, what was it like for you, and what advice do you have for us as we embarked on this journey?
I think that a lot of us who were women going into neurointervention at that time, I did have some mentors and some people that I could look up to, and some of them are here. Ishil Sachi is here, and it was really inspiring to watch those women in the field. The first female president of SNIS, Lee Jensen, I remember her being an inspiration. It is true that the field is very male-dominated, so throughout my career, I've often been the only woman on the team or in the room, and so I would say that maybe it's the new era, but the men have been very welcoming. I think that from time to time you encounter some sort of unconscious bias, maybe. I don't think there's any conscious bias, or at least I haven't encountered it, or it's very, very rare in most of the industry and other physicians that we work with nowadays. So it may take a few extra steps to prove yourself, but I think, nowadays things have really opened up, and I think that now that concept of unconscious bias, or the concept that things aren't exactly equal, is sort of very open. It's out in the open, and other women in the field have felt empowered to bring this up now, and we've been really supported by certain men in the field, such as Adam Arthur comes to mind, very, very supportive. I work with Jay Mako, very supportive. I think we're at a good stage right now. There's still some challenges, but we're at a good stage.
Yeah. And certainly every year I come here, there's more and more joining, which is a great sight to see.
Yeah, and now with the WIN group, there's a built-in support network.
It's a very active WhatsApp group.
Yes.
So what was it like working with your mentor?
Which one? Yeah, I came in to work with Alex Berenstein as a sort of extra fellowship focused on pediatrics. So I had finished training at Columbia with Phil Myers and Sean Levine and John Paul Spellman, and then previously with Bill Banks. So I've had a lot of mentors just in neurointervention. But so working with Alex first as a fellow, learning his specialized practice, which was focused on pediatrics, AVMs, and also the vascular malformations, was really something that I hadn't seen before, so it was great. And then working with Alex is great. I really had none of the negative effects, and maybe that's one of the advantages of being a woman. I'm not sure. We really work very well together. Yeah, over the years, we've become really like family. And now that I've taken over the practice, it's great. I still call him and get advice, and we're here together at this meeting, so it's nice. Yeah.
So we ask the same 3 questions at the end of the podcast. The first question is, if you have to choose 2 people who have been most influential in your career, who would they be and why?
Well, I think we already mentioned one, so I would say that Alex Berenstein has been probably the most influential in my career in terms of my neurointerventional practice. So I've learned a lot from him. We've spent hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of hours scrubbed in together doing cases. But not only the technical part, I really admire and aspire to be how he is as a doctor to a patient. He's really caring, really generous, and really he hasn't become jaded, though the practice, his practice has been for decades. Probably there's many people I could mention. I will talk about Jay for a little bit. So Jay Mako's been a partner for the last over 10 years. He really inspired me, at the time when we both joined Mount Sinai. We were sort of brought together at Mount Sinai, and he became the director of our service. And he really works hard and really cares about his mentees and the people that work for him. And he really tries to raise everyone up, which is a wonderful characteristic. And so he really looked at me and said, well, would you like to be involved in societies, be involved more in societies? And he's very good at pushing, too, which is sort of like, well, yeah, you could do it. He's sort of this kind of person that thinks he does 20 things at once, and he's sort of like, well, why don't you try doing 10 things at once, So, but it was great. It was a push to have to be involved with SNIS, and I was involved with SVIN as well. I really enjoyed doing that, and so I really have him to thank for opening my eyes to being involved in other aspects of our career, not just the, taking care of patients part.
If we fast forward 10 to 15 years, how do you imagine the field will look like?
By that time, we're going to have all these new procedures that we're doing. I wonder if at some point we're going to have subspecialists. We already kind of are beginning to see it in SNIS. We have the pediatric group, and we have the venous special interest group, and sort of people branching out. And right now people are doing everything, I think, but they have special interests. But then we're going to get into brain-computer interface and neuromodulation via the endovascular tree. And now we're seeing venous disease, but in addition, going through the venous system to place CSF shunts. And so it's really growing the number of diseases we're treating and the different procedures we're doing. And headache, that's really exciting. If that is a safe and effective procedure to do, there's a lot of patients that can be treated. I think that we're going to have the same things that we're doing now, the same disease states that we're treating now, maybe some more advanced tools. Maybe we're going to have robotics and AI helping us treating those diseases. And then in addition, we're going to have all these other diseases. So maybe teams will need to be divided. And it's definitely exciting for the young people out there. There's really, I think, no limit to what we can do.
The last question is, what is the one thing you would advise our trainee to do today to make them a more successful and a better interventionalist in the future?
So for the trainees, I think going back to what I said, getting exposure to many different perspectives is important. So attending meetings, seeing cases, going to complications courses. I think also to not get too distracted by the brand new or flashy things as well, that the basics. So concentrate on mastering the basics, anatomy, learning standard techniques that have been around for many years. We're in Paris, the home of balloon-assisted coiling, so those sort of things, and using glue, for instance, that's come back now with MMA EMBO, but those sort of basic techniques that sometimes you just need to know how to do those. So I think learning the basics and then keeping your eyes open and getting different perspectives from different mentors.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fifi, for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.